much for joining us today. It's our pleasure to host a Lunch and Learn today about the 3 plans you need as you age. And I'm really excited to have 2 wonderful speakers today, Karl Frank and Vanessa Johnston. So today we'll discuss the 3 plans that everyone needs as we age. The first is an aging plan. The second is our end-of-life plan. And the third is an estate plan. So we'll share some anecdotes, provide resources, and hopefully share a couple of laughs too, because if you're like me, I would like to age on my own terms, and I would like to provide some resources and share experiences, and hopefully collaboratively we'll have a good conversation about how to make that possible as we grow older. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording the event, which means that if you are participating on Zoom today, you'll be muted and we won't see your picture, but you still can participate by typing your questions in the chat. And then the folks who are here in the office, I welcome your questions, and I'll be facilitating a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So we'll start to get to business here, and I'll first introduce Karl Frank, who is my partner in life as well as business. We're about 20 years into the business. Many of you know Karl well. He's a CFP. He's very active in the financial planning community and is an excellent person, I think, to help guide us through this discussion. And then I'm also really pleased to introduce you all to Vanessa Johnston. She's an end-of-life doula in the Denver metro area. She's been doing this since 2017. So if you've never heard of an end-of-life doula or you've never met an end-of-life doula, this is your chance. Now you'll know what this means, and you'll have met someone who does this. She is the vice president of the Colorado End-of-Life Collaborative nonprofit organization. She's also the Rocky Mountain Regional Facilitator for the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance, and she's active with Compassion and Choices Medical Providers Advocacy Group, and we've provided some additional resources from that group that each of you will receive either in person today, or we'll be able to send that to you if you're participating on Zoom. So without further ado, let me go ahead and hand this over to Karl. Thanks, Karl.
Thanks, Stacey. I hope you guys are doing great. I'm really excited to present today. This is maybe the most important topic we're going to talk about all year. This is a really big deal for us. As you may or may not know, we provide an expert network team here at A&I. And on our typical team, you've got your wealth manager and your accountant and your attorney and a banker, whomever else might be appropriate for your situation. But all of us, as we age, need a different expert team. And we're going to depend on a whole different set of people out there, and our network needs to grow a little. And so we changed our philosophy this year as a number of our clients face these challenges. And as our own families face these challenges, we decided to get real. And so I'm right in the middle of, I'm in my 7th week, I think, a 10-week course about aging planning. And so you are in the beta test right now with this presentation today. And our plan today is to talk about an agenda. We're going to talk about the aging plan. I'll describe what that is. We're going to talk about end-of-life planning, and that's where our expert who does this for a living is going to join us, Vanessa. And then at the end, I'm going to talk real quickly about the plans that you probably already have called the estate plan. I want to check off that list as well, because aging planning, end-of-life planning, and estate planning really are very different from each other. And the aging planning is where I want to begin, because most of us don't have one. Now, if you don't remember anything today, this is the most important. I've been told by we get these guest lectures every week, and all this reading that I'm doing in my class from all around the country, all these people are experts. They say most Americans don't know this, and that is that Medicare is not the same thing as Medicaid. And Medicare does not pay for long-term care. So it's really important. Medicare does pay for 3 days of a hospital stay and up to 100 days in a skilled nursing facility for whatever caused you to go into that hospital. But then you have to get out of there for at least 60 days, go back to a hospital for another 3 days before you can go back into a skilled nursing facility. So forget it, right? It's not going to happen, right? It's not real. So don't depend on Medicare to pay for your at-home or nursing home or skilled nursing or anything along those lines, other than for a very short period. All right, so what's an aging plan? Well, an aging plan addresses everything you see on the screen here. It's going to talk about the who, what, where, when, and why about what's going to happen as we age. Who's going to care for me? Where am I going to be cared for? What's going to cause me to change plans? What are my plans in case those do change? And the why. Well, the why is actually pretty easy, and the why is where we're going to start, because the plans that our elders have and the plans that our adult children have are in total alignment. But it's really important just to set our goals. 70% of us want to end life at home. We want to die with dignity, we want to die with independence, and we want to die with respect, and we don't want to be a burden on our kids. Right? That's a big similar goal. Almost all of us have these goals, right? And 70% of them say, I don't plan on any other plan other than to, when it all comes together and God chooses to take me away, that I'm at home and I'm with my stuff. Unfortunately, the truth is very different from that. And we lose control as we go. So we want to put together a plan for that. Our kids want a really similar thing. Our kids want our elders to be safe and happy. We don't want them to suffer. We don't want them to pain. We want the best possible quality of life and the best possible care for our elders as well. And then finally, the son and the daughter really just want to be a son and daughter. They really don't want to have to learn how to become a healthcare administrator, a care coordinator, a nurse, as well as a money manager, and all the other things that happen later in life. We really just want to be sons and daughters. And if we don't have sons and daughters, we're solo agers. Whoever the person is who loves us and is caring for us at the end of life, they really want to just do the loving, right? And the work needs to be done by someone else. So you can begin to see the challenges of the aging plan, right? You really want to get clear about the who and the what and the where, because the why lines up. The why lines up. If we do this right and our plans come together, then things work out a whole lot easier. I wanted to bring up something here that's actually really important that a lot of people don't know, and we don't spend enough time to it until we're actually doing it. And that's what the lead instructor of my class calls the caregiver snowball. So caregivers themselves need self-care. We need to take care of ourselves as we're caring for the elders. And we know the causes of health decline, right? We know dementia, cancer, tripping, falling, heart-related, breathing issues. All of these issues cause us to have a health issue. Come on in, don't worry. Yeah, good to see you. Thank you for making it. Grab your food and have a seat. It's going to be a great time. So what we're doing in this plan is I'm saying, well, yeah, okay, we know that, but we're not planning for it. Imagine this, if your child were to have a diagnosis with some sort of a illness, you would do everything you could to find out everything you could about that illness. You'd ask everyone you knew, you'd join an organization, you'd Google the internet, you'd ask all the doctors, you'd get second opinions, third opinions. You'd work extremely hard at that diagnosis. But you know what's going to cause problems in your own life. You know what's going to happen there. It's going to be a trip or a fall or something completely outside of your control. It's going to be heart-related, cancer-related, diabetes, whatever it is, right? But we're not doing the same level of work. Right? We're not doing the same level of work for ourselves, and we should. Because as a caregiver, what happens is what's on the screen. As a caregiver, what happens is, well, we just love this person, we're going to take care of them, right? And so maybe initially we feel occasionally it's a little bit inconvenient, and we start to have some bad feelings. And then the bad feelings happen a little bit more frequently. And then eventually we're just in denial. We're saying, no, I'm just being selfish. I need to take care of this person. They loved me when I was younger, or if it were reversed, they would care for me. And so we're just in denial, but then all of a sudden it happens consistently, and you're giving up your time. You're maybe giving up your own money. You're certainly sacrificing what you would do normally to spend your time with this person who needs the care. And then finally it's overwhelming. And what this means, and what the stats show, and this is a scary stat, and I'm not always going to be negative in this presentation, but 66% of caregivers who are age 66 and over, in other words, the spouses who are caring for someone, have a higher mortality rate than the non-caregivers, than everybody who's not giving care. In other words, it can actually kill you, right? Caregiving can actually kill you, the caregiver. We have to take that, you can't overestimate the risks and the time and the challenges and the stress, and we're not prepared for this, right? We're not trained for this. So let me walk through, that's the who, right? The who part of the caregiving. We want to take care of ourselves. I'll have a few tips here in a minute. But now I want to talk about the where, because the where is, like I was saying earlier, pretty much we're all in alignment, right? We have three big choices that we could make, most of us. I mean, there are others, of course, but we could live at our own home, and that's where most of us want to be. We want to live with dignity, independence, and in our own space with our own stuff. We could move in with the kids, or the kids could move in with us if we have them, and we've got somebody else, then that generation could move in with us, or some other person who we love could move in with us. We could care for each other, and that's a second choice. And the third choice is the facilities, which a lot of us want to avoid. And what I'm encouraging us to think about today is always have a plan B, and maybe have a plan C, because any one of those health issues could derail your best laid plans. That staying at home and providing and leaning on whomever for the healthcare, even though you want to be independent, might not work out. Or there could be a health issue where it's no longer safe. Let's look at the home, right? Look at this happy couple. They're just loving it. They're bouncing on their bed, right? This is
all the time.
Isn't this what you do? Most of you are retired, right? In your own setting with their stuff and memories around them, they've got more privacy and dignity. They've got a sense of control. They got a say in what's happening in their life. It can be more comfortable for them, and it can be more comfortable for the family, right? Because it's just a little bit easier if mom and dad just stay at home. They've still got friends. They've got neighbors. They can visit more easily. They've got more and more aging at home solutions today than ever before. Home care, technology, services with enough support and care and money, the right care team, seniors can remain at home safely. And then finally, of course, the family feels a lot less guilty if mom and dad are where they wanted to be. Right? Everything works until it doesn't, because there's some cons to staying at home. And the cons is a long list. So let me just walk through what could happen and why you need a plan B. Many seniors assume Medicare will pay for whatever care they need, and we already talked about that, right? The number one thing to remember today is Medicare won't. Companion care ranges between $28 and $60 an hour. And then there's going to be shift minimums, so you might need to pay them 4 hours just to show up to do the simple task. Right? That adds up. Seniors are in uncharted territory. They don't realize the traffic coming into the house. So between home care workers, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, possibly hospice, all of the chore lists to do, the daily money manager who might need to come into, nurses, there might be 20 people a week coming in the home. That's not really comfortable. How can I trust all these people? Who are they? What if you can't find quality and reliable companions? Or what if a companion that's supposed to show up no shows and the company doesn't have a replacement for them? What if you live in a rural area with limited help? What if no kids and you're widowed? Who's going to make sure you're thriving at home? Safety, financial scams, fire, falls, weight loss. Mental stimulation may be limited. And we tend to lean on the television, and the television is just flat out depressing, isn't it? Right? It can start a dangerous spiral. Weather, forest fires in Colorado, hurricanes on the coast. What about evacuation? And what if you're not physically able to do it? If you're too ill or you can't stock up on the supplies to stay? What if you live in an unsafe neighborhood? What if your companions don't speak English? You need a translation app to talk to somebody who's providing you care? That's not ideal. What if you require two companions because of weight gain or dementia or another physical ailment? Now your costs have suddenly doubled. And then who are you going to find? Two people that consistently can show up? What if mom needs one level of care and dad needs another? What if the parent claims they want to live at home, but they're unwilling to allow these companions to come in? Real life story, right? More than once. They're like, no, I don't want that person. And then whoever the care coordinator is like, but I got nobody else. What about isolation? Real problem living at home, regardless of your age, can be isolation and loneliness. Right? What if the behaviors, confusion start to worsen? What if one spouse sees it in the other spouse, then the other spouse is struggling and you can't provide the relationship? Right? Two make one in that case. Now you've got two patients instead of one patient. Decreased mobility at home can be a danger. So aging at home works until it doesn't. That's why we need a plan B. Hopefully we make it. Hopefully we achieve all this at home. But you can make choices today to learn about plan Bs and maybe plan Cs. So the second one is kids home, right? And many families just make a knee-jerk reaction. We're like, yep, I'm moving in with the kids, or the kids are moving in with me. And that's great but sometimes it happens because they're in crisis and they really don't have that other plan. It's what has to happen, right? What we recommend is a family meeting to discuss the expectations, right? Who's going to help with what? And when they don't help, who's going to provide the respite? How will bills be shared among the family? So that arrangement works until it doesn't. Privacy issues. Is the home senior safe? What happens is that needs to happen. What happens when the care level exceeds the abilities of the kid? There's financial concerns. It's not cheap. Guilty. Not everybody is wired to be a caregiver. There's family dynamics. What if the spouse is no longer supportive of the in-laws? What about the annoying behaviors and mannerisms? They can really add up, especially over long periods of time. Pets, kids, socialization, entertaining. Everybody has a different group of people. What about dementia progression? The typical aging issues, mobilities, falls. What about missed work, missed vacations? Now you can start to see that caregiver snowball real quickly. What happens when the siblings don't help out like promised? And then what happens when the adult kid relocates? What if there's a divorce? What if the caregiver gets sick? Right? So kid's home, great, until it isn't. So now you're stuck. If you haven't already thought about the Plan C, the facilities, it's a good time to do that. Right? So facilities, they're still happy, right? I chose a happy photo. They're not wearing masks. I don't know. We got the COVID thing coming back, so maybe they're wearing masks. But I don't think so. We visited many of our clients. They're not wearing masks in the facilities that we do. And the facilities, the one I want you to learn more about are the continuing care retirement community, CCRC. And so they've got the multiple levels of care. And you can start with the townhome that you're completely on your own, and it's just like being at home. Only everybody in your community is just like you. And what we have seen when people move into either a senior community where they're just as minimum age level, is their health goes up because their attitude goes up and everybody's having a lot more fun together, right? So their health can actually increase. And we've seen that allegorically with our own clients when that happened. And then when the care needs need to change, at least you're in the same community. So you're not living on your independent place, but maybe you need an assisted. And then there's also the additional levels after that. So the additional levels are really important to learn about. And you want to choose those facilities now while you can, because oftentimes the wait lists are long, 2 years or more. And our clients are not going to be able to depend on Medicaid because we've done a good job for you and you've done a good job saving and not spending yourself. You're never going to have the financial minimum that you need that. And so you're going to want to know how much these places cost. You're not going to want to fall in love with or have your kids not know the financial situation. If you choose now and you say, okay, so this one out here at that location or this one that's being built over at that location seems to be okay. So even though my plan is to stay in place and have the caregivers come to me, but what if, or the kids come in or I move in with the kids, if you need to go to a facility, it's worth taking the time to learn about them. There's assisted living facilities, secured memory care, and alarmed memory care. Alarmed memory care would be, there's an alarm if you fall off the bed. Skilled rehab, skilled nursing, palliative care, and finally hospice. So I want you to learn about that. I'm going to hand it off to our guest. Vanessa's fantastic. I think you're going to really enjoy Vanessa. Vanessa, just boss me around. I'm going to click the slides for you.
Great.
And we'll let you go.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. All that was really important information, Karl. So I really appreciate you bringing that to the people. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
We can. Maybe
Okay.
Turn it up
a little bit.
Terrific. Thank you. Well, I apologize in advance if I speak too fast, but I have a lot of information I'd like to share. So again, plans everyone needs as we age. I'm going to be focusing on the end of life options to consider. And let me just say that I'll mostly be focusing on new options. So you may have heard of, hopefully everyone there has a will, a living will, advanced care directive. So I'm going to be talking about things maybe you haven't heard of. Most people don't know that Colorado is a global leader in this area. So those are the things that I'll be talking about. And Stacey said at the beginning that maybe we can share some laughs. So I'll just share this quote from Gail Rubin before we start. She says, just as talking about sex won't make you pregnant, talking about death won't make you dead. So it's okay to talk about these things. Okay, next slide, Carl.
Good one.
That's great.
So this is me. My mission is to empower those who are dying to experience their final milestone with dignity and grace. So as an end-of-life doula, I provide individualized, emotional, spiritual, and informational support for people with a life-limiting diagnosis and their loved ones. I wish to be a compassionate companion and provide a witness and sacred service to honor the final chapter in others' stories. So I did do my training with Anelda in 2017 and established my own business, Denver EOL Doula, in 2018. And then set about finding everyone in this field in the Denver metro area. And in 2020, I co-founded a nonprofit organization with 4 other death doulas, and it's called the Colorado End of Life Collaborative. So we do have doulas across the state and also affiliate members like grief counselors, celebrants, estate planners, and funeral providers. So that's kind of about me. And now we'll move into talking about preparing as best you can for the last chapter of your life, right? And we don't have foreknowledge of that. Death is still the great mystery for all of us. And I'm going to be mostly talking about those of us who have the luxury of time. You know, I'm not able to help people who die suddenly, but we're going to hope that everyone here attending today has a long, meaningful life. And that's kind of where my focus is going to be. So if that's what happens for you, then you might come up against palliative care and hospice. So let's start there. Next slide, please, Karl. So palliative care is about comfort care and treatment for disease. So most people don't understand that there is a difference here between palliative care and hospice. And the main difference is that you can continue to pursue treatment options while still on palliative care. So this is really helpful for lengthy disease processes because there's no time limit associated with it. So like ALS or cancer or one of those horrible diseases that go on for a very long time, you're going to want extra support that focuses on your comfort, right? So the emphasis is on living and on how one chooses to live the life they have each day, whatever the journey brings and however long it lasts. All right, so next slide. So hospice is a little different. Most people have heard of it, but don't like to talk about it. But it's important to kind of bring this out of the shadows so we know what our options are. So hospice is a service, not a place. It can meet you in any of those places Karl described, right? Your own home, your kid's home, a facility, wherever. They come to where you are. And it is paid by Medicare since 1983 in the United States. So it is a benefit available to every single person in this country for free. Okay? So eligibility is determined every 6 months. And what that means is that if someone has been diagnosed with a life-limiting disease, then their doctor will work with them to kind of see what they think the life expectancy is. But again, we're working with a mystery here and we don't really know. So eligibility, it's kind of reviewed every 6 months. Whereas palliative care, there is no sort of time limit around that. But this is also focused on comfort care and symptom management. So we're no longer pursuing treatment options, but really managing the symptoms. And for every person on hospice, you have a multidisciplinary team that's dedicated to your care. So that's going to include a hospice physician, a nurse, a nursing assistant, a social worker, a chaplain, and a volunteer. So that's for every single person. So if you want to know more, you can go to that website there, nhpco.org, and it'll tell you more about that. All right, next slide, please. So what does an end-of-life doula do? Well, I am not part of that medical care system. I am outside of that system. If I were to be on that team that everyone gets in hospice, I would kind of sit somewhere between the chaplain and the social worker. And when I first started doing this work in 2017, I thought, we definitely need to be on the hospice team, but the longer I've done it, the more I can see that the independence and flexibility that I have being outside of the medical care system, I'm able to help families in a much better way. So what I do is reinforce the medical care plan of hospice. So hospice is in charge of deciding the medical care plan of action, and I just reinforce it. I remind people, the doctor said that we were going to take this medication, the nurse wants you to do this. So I kind of reinforce things. My services are privately paid, so it's not covered by insurance, which is good and bad, right? So I'm not restricted in any way, which our hospice staff, unfortunately, is very restricted in what they can and can't do. But it's also an out-of-pocket expense for families. So when Karl was talking about, planning ahead for those caregivers and things, this would be another service that you might consider. So currently there's no national board that regulates end-of-life doulas. And so the skill set may differ depending on the training. There are lots of different trainings. If a certification were to come for this profession, it would come from the NHPCO, the organization I mentioned on the last slide. But this is new, right? There have always been people in our communities that have served this role, but we don't live communally anymore. So it's emerging as a profession. And so it's early days. I often compare myself to yoga practitioners in the late 70s or birth doulas in the early 80s. It's we're still early days, kind of figuring out where we sort of fit into the systems already, but there's value. There's value there. And so what I do is provide practical non-medical care. I am a compassionate companion for people at the end of life. And these are kind of all the different roles that I might be asked to fill. And again, I have more flexibility and independence. If someone is really anxious and stressed out because no one has walked the dog, I can do that. A hospice nurse isn't going to do that, going to be able to do that for you. But I also do a lot of things like life review with folks and planning for vigils at the end. And we can talk more about that. But mostly I have smaller caseloads, so that allows for individualized care. So I don't work with more than 3 families at a time, and they're usually at different stages of their disease process. And my goal is always for a peaceful transition for that person, whatever that looks like for them, whatever comfort means to them, which is different for every person. So my job is to find out what those things are, to determine what the family dynamics are, to make sure everyone feels comfortable with what's happening, because even though it can be a sad process and it represents a loss, it's also natural. As humans, we have a finite lifespan. So rather than ignoring that fact, let's prepare for it. And what is the best way that we can shift from fear and anxiety to more love and meaning? Because I think everybody deserves that. Next slide. So here are kind of the services I offer. First and foremost, companionship and advocacy. My number one client is going to be the person with the disease. So that's my number one person. And if there are differing opinions, I have some experience with facilitating difficult conversations. And I'm not in the family, right? So I'm not part of that dynamic. I'm a neutral third party that's kind of coming in and seeing what's happening and trying to manage expectations as we get closer to the end. I also do a lot of education and support. These days somebody can grow to be an adult and never have had any experience with death and never have seen it in their lives. And so it can be very shocking, and so I try and explain what is normal what to expect. So that requires a lot of communication, a lot of planning. I offer respite and sitting vigil. As I mentioned before, we do a lot of life review. So a lot of the research around dignity therapy has shown that at the end of life, people enjoy telling stories about their lives because it helps them come to terms with the end, you know? So I have a lot of conversations about, what are you most proud of? Who's had an impact on you? Who have you had an impact on? And that gets people more to a peaceful place. If we can talk about any regrets or unfinished business or any of that sort of thing with a neutral third party, it really helps people to come to that more peaceful place. The vigil planning I like to do in advance. It's for those days and maybe even hours when you maybe can't communicate. How would you like things to be? So those of you that are familiar with the work of birth doulas, this is the part that I have most in common with them. Do you want essential oils? Do you want classical music playing? Do you want your dog on the bed? Do you want a hand massage? Is there, who do you want to be in the room? Is there somebody you absolutely don't want to be in the room? Because I can make sure of that, right?
Okay.
So yeah, so that's vigil planning, and we do it before the need becomes urgent, right? So we do it in advance. Legacy work would be more like helping the loved ones who are surrounding the person kind of process what's happening. So I'll just share a very, very simple example that I give to all of my clients. If someone is dying in the home or a facility, have a notebook next to their bed, and then whenever people come to visit, ask them to write down like their favorite memory of that person or when they first met or something like that. And then after a while, you'll have the notebook filled up. And then after the person dies, the family will have that as a memento. And they'll be able to read back through and remember how their person touched lives of others. And it really helps our heads and hearts kind of get in alignment and catch up with each other and process what has happened. So there's also aftercare, which is early grief and bereavement support. I usually stay with families about 4 to 6 weeks after a death. If people are still really struggling, most hospices have a bereavement team that I can connect them with, or grief counselors I know in the community. But every doula is different. I have some colleagues who do home funerals. We're trained in that. Some who are celebrants. I offer Reiki and energy practices. So it's important to interview doulas before you start working with one. Next slide, please. All right, so here in Colorado, we have medical aid in dying. You might have also heard of it referred to as death with dignity in some other areas of the country. Compassionate Choices is the advocacy group that really drives legislation. It's important to know that the words you use they matter. And so we try not to say physician-assisted suicide because it is not suicide. Medical aid in dying is a process that is only available to people who are dying anyway, right? Suicide is an option that healthy people make, but in this state, we have this legal protocol that's available for people who have a life-limiting diagnosis and their doctor has told them, this is kind of what's ahead of you. So this is available for people who want to limit the suffering, right? And so it's currently legal in 10 states plus DC as of last year. The cause of death on the death certificate is listed as whatever their terminal illness is, because that's what they have died from. So if it's ALS or cancer or something like that, that's what's going to be listed. Now, the process does have some accessibility issues. It's not as easy to engage with as some people might think. I have had the unfortunate situation of helping families through the process and then they die before it's completed. So it takes a while, to go through all the steps and the paperwork and things. So, talk to your doctor ahead of time. Make sure that they're in favor of this. If you're considering a hospice, make sure that they're in favor, because even though it's legal in Colorado, hospices can be technically neutral, which means that their staff can't be in the room. when you do it, which puts families at a disadvantage, right? So that's what I try and help with. Okay, next slide. Then there's also voluntary stopping eating and drinking. I'll say this is not illegal anywhere. Everybody has the right to refuse medical care, and that includes nutrition and hydration. Some people do this informally without really getting everybody on board, and we've seen that, but it goes much better if everybody is on the same page and knows that this is the choice that has been made. And so it is a natural process of death. At the end of our lives, things are shutting down. And again, it's natural. That's what happens. And this process is not painful. It's the disease that is painful. And again, that's why we want you to be on hospice so that they can take care of that symptom management, right? But it does require a knowledgeable support team. Next slide, please. So I did mention home funerals. This is an option. It's safe and legal in all 50 states. It's really focused on family and community-centered care. There's a significant cost savings, and home funeral guides assist with the family. And it really changes our experience with grief because you see it, right? The picture at the top is from 150 years ago when all funerals were home funerals. And the one on the bottom is my colleague, Cindy Kaufman, who's a home funeral guide here in Denver. And you can find more guides on the homefuneralalliance.org website. And it really allows us, again, for our heads to catch up to our hearts with the loss that is happening. Because again, in our culture, we've kind of outsourced all of this, all of these things related to death and dying, which I understand why we have, but we've kind of done ourselves a disservice because now we don't know how to function with grief. We don't know how to deal with death and dying and loss. Yeah. Next slide, please. All right. How am I doing on time, Karl?
Doing great.
Oh,
Yeah.
Good. All right, so we'll move into talking about final disposition options. And here we have the 5 that are available in Colorado. Okay, so again, we have more options than almost anybody in the world. I'm not going to talk about Crestone and the funeral pyre there because you have to be a resident to take advantage of that. But in Colorado, we do have more than most. Okay, so here we have on the left, traditional funeral, in the middle there, green burial. Up at the top, fire cremation, then on the bottom, water cremation, and then the last slide is a picture of natural organic reduction. So next slide, we'll talk about these. So I'm not going to talk much about traditional burial because most people know what that's all about. So we'll move into green burial. This is available in all 50 states. It's basically when you do not embalm the body. And embalming is not required by law at all, okay? Those of the Jewish tradition have never embalmed, right? That's the green burial has been part of their tradition for millennia. It's when the body is placed in a cotton or silk burial shroud or a natural biodegradable container like straw, unfinished wood, cardboard, or here wicker basket. And you can find more information at greenburialcouncil.org. Next slide, please. So green burial, as you can imagine, is much better for the planet than traditional burial, which buries the traditional vaults with the concrete around it. So those are the 2 burial options. Now we'll move into cremation options. So most people know about traditional fire cremation. It's become more popular since the 80s. It used to be traditional burial was more popular, but we're kind of switching with that. It is cheaper than burial. It's a simpler process, and the family does receive ashes to store or spread as a memory. 56% of Americans choose this option right now. But on the flip side, fire cremation is very costly to the environment. There's a high use of fossil fuels just to operate the crematoriums, and they emit 360,000 metric tons of CO2 yearly, and they release sulfur dioxide, heavy metals, and mercury into the air. So everything that was going into the ground as far as toxic chemicals and formaldehyde is part of embalming, but now you have these chemicals in the air, right? And those cremated remains are actually toxic. So if they're scattered into a river, it's not so good for the fish and animals that live in the river, because they're not ashes, right? They are actually bone fragments. So just so you know. And again, these are all the options you have available to you here in Colorado. And I don't want to try and convince anybody of anything, but it's important to have an informed decision, right? All right, next slide, please. So one of the newer final disposition options we have is water cremation, which is also called aquamation, biomation, resomation, flameless cremation, or alkaline hydrolysis. And those are all names for the same thing. This is a picture from Beatrix Cremation, which is in Denver, and it has a very low environmental impact. And it also returns bone ash cremains for loved ones and results in a non-toxic bionutrient liquid for fertilizer. So instead of putting things into the air, it uses water and chemicals like potassium, alkaline chemicals, to break down the body. And so families will receive the cremains that they can use, for an urn or something like that. But then the liquid is completely pH neutral, no DNA, anything like that. And it either goes into wastewater or it can be sent to like flower farms. Beatrix works with Half Moon Farms in Lakewood to grow plants and trees and flowers, or it can be sent to the Colorado Burial Preserve in conservation efforts. Next slide. Okay, so the newest thing is natural organic reduction, and it works on the same principles as composting. So it's also known as human composting, body composting, recomposition, and terramation. Now, currently, it's only legal in these 6 states and in Sweden, but I think that will change as things go because, more people are concerned about the environment. And this is probably, well, it is the most regenerative and the most beneficial for our planet. So what happens is you have these big vessels, and this is a picture of providers from the Natural Funeral in Lafayette, and they have vessels. And this was from the first person in Colorado to do this in November of 2021. And then in March of 2022, we had a beautiful ceremony out in Florence, Colorado at the Colorado Burial Preserve. And as you can see, it's soil, right? And so again, pH neutral, no DNA, no nothing left but dirt, really. But it's a lot. It's 200 pounds of soil. So that's about like a full truck bed worth. And most people, if they were to get some of this, they don't want all of that. I mean, you could use it in your gardens and stuff, but that's a lot. So this was at the Colorado Burial Preserve, and it's used on trees and plants and conservation in any way you can use compost. So it really is giving back to the earth in that way. And so for somebody that, if they were an environmental activist all their life, then it doesn't make sense at the end of their lives for them to choose something like fire cremation, right? This would make more sense to them. So just to give you an overview of all your options that you have available. Next slide. So what do I want you to know? I want you to share at least one thing you've learned from this presentation with at least one person, right? Because we have to get the word out there. Because we live in a death-phobic culture, nobody likes to talk about this, but we have to make it safe to talk about because that's the only way that you're going to be knowledgeable. I really feel like knowledge is power. So we need to break down the taboos about talking about it. And, it's okay to talk about. So if you don't have an advanced care plan, please go to 5wishes.org. That's a really, really easy one. And it's a way to communicate what your wishes are. Okay? If you're like, gosh, Vanessa, I don't even know how to have this conversation, go to theconversationproject.org. for how to talk about what matters to you and have a say in your healthcare, because that's going to give you like templates that you can follow for this important conversation. And next slide, I think that's it.
I got that. Vanessa, thank you so much. That was great. I mean, really depressing, but no.
Yeah.
No, it was super informative. To me, I found it really enlightening.
I try to focus on empowerment, Karl. You know, we still have choices we can make that make an unfortunate situation better for us. So I'm aiming for better, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Ask some questions.
Let's give me 5 minutes. Let me wrap up the next part. And then, yeah, please ask a bunch of questions. And everybody online, please start typing in your questions now. Let me give the next part. So there's a couple of handouts that I've given you. This is one of the workbooks. And then folks online will make it available to you in tomorrow's email. Actually, everybody who attended will get the email to you. And you can do that online or you can do it in person. And then I've also got the 5 wishes, a stack of them up front as well. But now most of our clients have done a lot of advanced planning, and you might find some of the 5 wishes are duplicative to that. Because the estate planning is where I think a lot of us think about when we think about the end of life. And we can, as financial planners, check a box and say, oh, estate plan's done, they visited an attorney, they did the blah, 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 blah. And we titled things correctly, made the beneficiaries, blah, blah, blah. And that's not good enough. As we just talked about, I think the biggest challenges are the aging plan. And I think the end of life planning can actually be quite beautiful. I think that I love these new options that Vanessa was talking about there. It was much more empowering to me to know that there are choices. From an estate planning financial point of view, most of us are not going to have an estate tax problem. Those limits on the screen are huge. But most of us don't know that you can actually give $17,000 a year right now. It's much higher than what a lot of us think it was. For whatever reason, a lot of us think it's like 14,000 or 10,000 or some smaller number. It's gone up and it's going up. And next year, I think they said to be 17.5, but don't quote me on that. This year it is 17,000. And you can double that if you have 2 parents. You can increase it even further if you have a lot of kids you want to give it to. And that just keeps it out of the estate tax completely. So you can do that. A good estate plan includes everything that's on the screen. I'm just going to leave that up for a minute, because much of what Vanessa talked about here is on the screen already. So the revocable trust and the last will and testament, you need a will. Everybody should have one. You can create a will yourself fairly easily. You don't need an attorney for that. But we do recommend always to talk to an attorney. And attorneys range in price from very simple to very extravagant. We have a great law firm on the floor right above us right now that we'd be happy to introduce you to. The financial power of attorney is what we use as a client declines and what will enable somebody to act on your behalf financially. The medical power is the key, and this is what the 5 wishes talks about. And it's what really, quite frankly, I was talking about at the beginning with the aging plan as well, because it's probably the same person. Whoever you trust with your health is probably the person for the distance from the very beginning until the end. The living will is where you give that person instructions. And the most important part that you'll find in the handouts that I'm giving you, that you'll find in the 5 wishes that Vanessa talked about with the end-of-life doula, is the conversation. It's the conversation around what you really want. When you're no longer able to speak for yourself, having a conversation about that early now, so that they can honor that and feel less guilt and feel less trauma and just feel what they want to feel about loving you, and not having to make the decision because you've made it for them. So these are all really important, but the person is the key, because doctors are not sued by medical power of attorney directives. They're not sued by the documents. They're sued by humans. And so if your human gets to the end and your human that you've chosen doesn't honor what you want, the doctor will listen to the human and not the document. So you want to have those conversations. You want to have those conversations. So tips for meeting with the attorney, if you haven't already done so, know what you want, talk to us. We can plan with you so that when you go in there, it's faster and easier. Attorneys often charge by the hour, and that's not a small hourly rate. So we can help you figure out some of the details about the questions that they're likely to ask you. And so when you get in there, it's just a little easier and you get all the documents checked. But remember, it's the humans that matter, and it's the conversations while we're alive that mean the most and will have the biggest impact. And then finally, the third idea is the Family Financial Album. It's a great document. It covers a lot of, it's a supplement. Vanessa, I don't know if you've seen one of these yet. Many of you in the room, I hope already have one. If you haven't, please check it out. But it is a great tool to help you and help your kids near the end of life. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Stacey. and we'll wrap it up.